November 1979. A man stands outside a jewelry shop in Tehran. The rial is collapsing. The government insists everything is under control. Inside the shop, the price of a single gold coin changes twice in one afternoon. By nightfall, the doors close early. Not because there's no demand, because there's nothing left to sell. The people who arrived first didn't come to speculate. They came to survive. 45 years later, the same scene repeats in different languages, different currencies, different flags. The numbers change. The pattern doesn't. And the uncomfortable thought is this: whatever broke their world didn't announce itself ahead of time. It arrived quietly. Then, all at once. Most people ask the wrong question about the future. They ask, what will perform best over the next 10 years? That assumes the system stays intact. Historically, that assumption fails more often than it holds. The more accurate question is harder to sit with. When conditions change, when rules are rewritten, when stress replaces stability, what still holds value? Not temporarily, not on paper, in reality. If you study the last century, the answer emerges whether you want it to or not. Asset survival follows a pattern, just like currency failure. First comes excess, then leverage, then distortion, then loss of trust, and finally, repricing. We saw it in Weimar Germany, in Argentina, in Japan after 1990, in the US after 2008. Different triggers, same phases. The mistake is thinking the next 10 years will be exempt. Let's get specific. From 1913 to today, more than half of the world's reserve currencies lost that status. Equity markets have been wiped out multiple times in real terms. Bondholders have been made whole in nominal terms while being destroyed in purchasing power. Meanwhile, a small set of assets keeps reappearing in the historical record, not because they're exciting, but because they're structurally difficult to erase. Start with the one people dismiss precisely because it doesn't do anything. Gold. In 1933, the US government confiscated it. In 1971, it was officially severed from the dollar. In every decade since, critics have declared it obsolete. And yet, adjusted for inflation, gold preserved purchasing power through the Great Depression, the inflationary 1970s, the 2008 crisis, and the post-pandemic monetary expansion. Between 2000 and 2020, gold rose roughly 500%, while the dollar lost over 40% of its purchasing power. Gold doesn't grow, it doesn't innovate, it doesn't compound, it simply refuses to be diluted. That's the point. When the unit of account is unstable, neutrality becomes strength. Next is foreign hard currency exposure, not loyalty to any one country, but optionality. In Lebanon, deposits denominated in local currency lost over 95% of real value between 2019 and 2023. Cash dollars, held outside the banking system, did not. In Argentina, property is priced in dollars for a reason learned the hard way. In Asia, during the 1997 crisis, firms with dollar revenues survived while domestic currency balance sheets collapsed. Over the next decade, the exact reserve currency may evolve. What won't change is this: access to a currency not being actively debased by your own government is a form of insurance. It's not about return. It's about continuity. The third survivor surprises people who only think in tickers. Productive equities with global revenue. Not index funds blindly tied to one economy. Ownership in companies that sell essential goods or services across borders. During the inflationary 1970s, U.S. stocks looked flat in nominal terms, but companies with pricing power and international exposure maintained real value. In emerging market collapses, exporters consistently outperformed domestic-only firms. The mechanism is simple. Costs are local. Revenues are global. When the local currency falls, margins expand. Equity is not paper. It is a claim on productive capacity. When that capacity is diversified, the claim survives. Fourth is energy and resource infrastructure, not futures contracts, not speculative plays. Ownership or exposure to the systems that move electricity, fuel, water, and raw materials. In every modern crisis, energy shortages appear early and resolve late. From the oil shocks of the 1970s to Europe's energy scramble in 2022, price volatility punished consumers but rewarded owners of real supply. Over the last 50 years, energy assets have repeatedly outperformed during periods of inflation and geopolitical stress. Civilizations do many things. They do not function without energy. The fifth is productive land, not luxury real estate, not speculative development. Land that produces food, timber, or essential inputs. During the Great Depression, U.S. farmland values fell initially, then stabilized while urban real estate collapsed. In modern crises, from Ukraine to Venezuela, food production remains the last non-negotiable activity. Calories clear markets even when currencies don't. Land has risks. It's illiquid, it's taxable, it's vulnerable to policy. But it also produces something humans cannot substitute away from. Over long periods, that matters more than yield charts. Now compare that to what consistently fails. Fixed income assets locked into a single currency regime, long-duration bonds during inflationary decades, cash held inside fragile banking systems, pension promises dependent on perpetual growth and stable demographics. These don't fail suddenly, they fail politely, through restructuring, through temporary controls, through inflation that's framed as manageable until it isn't. The math does the damage quietly. Look around now. Global debt exceeds 330% of world GDP. Interest expense is rising faster than growth in most developed economies. Demographics are deteriorating. Energy systems are being re-engineered under political constraints. Central banks are trapped between inflation and insolvency. None of this guarantees collapse, but it precisely matches the early and middle stages seen before every major repricing of the last century. The point isn't to predict a single outcome. It's to recognize asymmetry. Some assets require stability to function. Others require only human necessity. Over the next 10 years, the world doesn't need perfection. It only needs stress. And stress reveals structure. The real lesson isn't fear, it's positioning. You don't need to abandon the system. You need to stop assuming it will protect you by default. Diversification isn't owning many things that fail for the same reason. It's owning things that fail for different reasons, or don't fail at all. Imagine yourself 10 years from now, not in a bunker, not in a panic, just standing in line somewhere ordinary. A grocery store, a bank, an airport. The numbers still exist, the screens still light up, but some forms of value quietly stopped working, others didn't. The difference won't come down to intelligence or effort. It will come down to whether you recognize the pattern early enough to step sideways while there was still room. History doesn't repeat out of spite. It repeats because incentives don't change. The assets that survive are the ones aligned with that reality. Everything else is decoration.